Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate everyone's patience as we're getting a bit of a later start today, but attendees are still coming in, so I'm going to give it another minute, and then we'll get on with things. In the meantime, while we are waiting, if someone wouldn't mind putting in the chat or the questions section confirming that they can hear me all right, that would be great. Melissa with a good to go. Thank you, Melissa. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, 3 Ways to Drive Loyalty Enrollment. We'll start with a look at today's agenda. The discussion is going to begin with sort of cementing why the enrollment discussion matters, why being strategic is so key, and then we'll delve into 3 ways to drive loyalty enrollment, that is communications, incentives, and employee contests. And then we'll conclude with some of the key takeaways from today. I'm very thrilled to be joined today by Paytronix Director of Strategy and Analytics for C-Stores, Jeff Hoover. Jeff, thanks so much for joining today. Jeff, we can start off today's discussion looking at why is enrollment strategy so key to your program's success. Can you tell us, maybe past the obvious reasons, that is having people in the program, why is it so important to get strategic about enrollment?
Sure, Ryan. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Great. So happy to talk to everyone today. But yeah, in terms of, there's a lot of other cool things that, a lot of our clients want to talk about, like segmentation and targeting. But it goes without saying, an old company I worked at used to say, we can send out a great, have a great party, right, with a promotion going on. But if you don't send out the invites and no one knows it's there, right, how much does it really mean? So there's a lot of fixed costs that come with these loyalty platforms. So we want to drive participation as high as possible, so you're getting the biggest bang for your buck when you're running these programs and have this investment. Also, those first few percent of people are going to sign up right away. Your most loyal guests already, right? They're coming to you frequently. You're capturing most of their share of wallet. Those customers, we can't really change their behavior that much. It's so important to get beyond that first 5, maybe even 10%, and get to that, what we look at, the 50th and 90th percentile guests, getting upwards of 50% of your customers on the loyalty program. But those people, as you get beyond that first 10%, up to 20, 30, 40%, are the people that you're not capturing their full share of wallet. That's where the more we learn about them, the more we can understand gaps in their visits, where we might be able to capture for an additional gas visit or other in-store purchases. So those are people we can really target and segment and change their behavior, and your program becomes much more meaningful and impactful when we can get to that point. And it's just important to be able to identify themselves early, so that we make that and monitor their behavior, so that it can lead to really robust segmentation later on down the road.
Makes sense. And from perhaps more of an internal perspective, how can you make a loyalty program important and really drive the initiatives behind boosting enrollment?
I think it's about getting leadership buy-in and focus on what success success looks like, and setting your team members up for success with the right ways to talk about loyalty, and they have good understanding of what your loyalty program is. And then that entail, with enforcement of that will help drive the participation to the level where we get beyond that first 5% of customers, and things like that.
Makes sense. So before we dive into the 3 ways to actually drive enrollment, I just want to contextualize the conversation a bit more by looking at some of the top reasons that loyalty programs fail. And looking at these 3 reasons, you can sort of see how enrollment sort of seeps in through the cracks and plays a role. There's maybe a lack of operational support, and ultimately you can see the quote in the bottom left there, nobody understood how it works. That could be referencing both the staff and the customers alike. Maybe the communications and the training around the loyalty program just weren't strong enough to keep it going. Maybe a lack of customer engagement. You can see the third reason there. Enrollment was dwindling. The program had just kind of lost its attractiveness and perceived value. And lastly, maybe there were some concerns over the financial performance. Maybe the loyalty program wasn't really driving returns. It was just providing discounts. For any of these reasons, a loyalty program may slow down. So to prevent that, let's look at some of the key methods to drive enrollment. And so again, kind of an introductory part here. Jeff, why is it so key to strategize around enrollment methods in the first place? Or rather, how?
Yeah, I think it's important to, I sort of look at it as, casting as wide a net as possible and allowing various touch points where your customers can join a program, whether it be directly downloading the mobile app or, a prompt after they make an NFC payment, or handing a physical card over to those customers that aren't maybe digitally as savvy and having them go over to a kiosk and maybe register in store. So it talks about the different types of enrollment methods, and there might be a customer they hit one or two of those, and we often find that it takes 3-4 times to ask a customer in a lot of cases before they are compelled to join loyalty. So if there's being asked that at the appropriate touch points that we sort of walk through, I think there's a better chance that you're ultimately going to grab that customer. So you want to meet them while they're already spending time with your brand, even reverse enroll, right? There might be media and a social media page talking about the loyalty program, and someone could click through to an enrollment site and reverse enroll there and ultimately become a member in that way without ever visiting the store. I think what we're seeing is that younger customer base, and we'll get into in some specific enrollment methods here, are gravitating more to the app, and a lot of our clients and loyalty programs have great design apps out there that have a ton of value beyond just identifying yourself as a loyalty member. But again, I think the biggest idea is cast as wide a net as possible so we can capture customers where they're touching your brand.
Absolutely. Well said, Jeff. So, I mean, with that, let's maybe kick off into some more specific discussions around enrollment channels. And part of the reason that we're going to go through these 6 methods of enrollment is, maybe you're offering only a handful out of the possible 6. And to Jeff's point, you want to make sure that you're casting as wide a net as possible. So the first one that we're going to look at is the mobile app. And I've said one advantage here is just a very friendly user experience that, immediately brings customers into the sort of off-premises digital experience that a brand provides, allows them kind of an all-purpose touch and go experience. And as an advantage from the get-go, it kind of enforces the app as the catch-all platform for all the customers' needs. Jeff, is this a pretty popular enrollment method, or does it have some advantages that we maybe haven't explored just on this slide?
Yeah, I would say it's probably the most significantly growing area where we're seeing enrollments begin and just downloading the app. Obviously, that's driven a lot by the digital assets that brands are developing out there, and I guess also customers just continuing to use their phone more as a total part of their life, no matter whether they're at a C-store or shopping at another retailer or just using it for social media. We also see that the value of a member that enrolls in the app and uses the app is sometimes as much as twice the value of a non-app member. So it's ultimately a channel, even if we don't get them to enroll directly in the app, that we want to drive them ultimately to. They may get a card and go in the evening of the next day and download the app and register that card in the app and ultimately be an app user. So the other nice thing about any digital enrollment method, especially with a mobile app, is that it's effectively 100% registration rate. If you're handing out a physical card, and we'll get into it, and there's a place for physical cards, I think, today, but we often see that at best 1 in 5, maybe 1 in 4 of those actually registers. So, again, the nice thing about mobile app is that people that go to enroll there are almost effectively 100% registration rate. We tend to, get a minor, less than a percent drop off there, but you're ultimately getting a registration much cleaner. And again, they're more valuable. So a great channel, and every client we work with is doing some form of mobile app to not only drive registrations, but obviously engage customers ongoing.
Absolutely, Jeff. Can you tell us a little bit more about why the value of an app member is, nearly double that of a non-app member? They're just kind of entering that engagement process. What sort of allows for that?
Yeah. Part of it is self-selection, and customers that are going to want to download the app are going to probably be more likely or more frequently visiting customers. But another element of that is the messaging and connection you have. Not only a lot of customers that download the app will also allow notifications. So there's an additional way to message people that are engaged in the app once they download it. Also, if online ordering customers are obviously going to be using your mobile app, and that's maybe part of the self-selection process, in that we know an online ordering customer, if you have that within your app, is much more value than a person that hasn't used your online ordering piece. So there's just lots of ways to drive additional value and offers and messaging when someone has the app that allows for a closer connection to them digitally.
Absolutely makes sense. Another method here, NFC payment. A huge advantage here is the convenience. You can have rewards, points, promotions all applied at the POS pretty seamlessly in a transaction. And another advantage we've noticed is NFC loyalty users are 3 times more likely to convert and 5 years younger than the average loyalty guest and 62% more likely to visit. So, kind of similar to what we're seeing from mobile app enrollment methods, but also, bearing down on something Jeff mentioned earlier. This is very attractive for some younger guests who are more on the tech savvy side. Jeff, anything to add on kind of the advantages or uniqueness of NFC payment enrollment?
Yeah, I think this is one of those touch points, right, where you're engaging with a customer digitally for some other reason. In this case, they're paying, and it can automatically prompt them on their digital device if they like to join loyalty. So they're sort of, we don't get a ton of convert. They convert more than, I guess, a normal transaction, but for those that convert, it's just an easy click into loyalty that can click you directly to download the app and register, sort of thing. So it's just taking advantage of, again, where they're experiencing and interacting with your brand and leveraging that opportunity to convert someone into loyalty.
Right, that's excellent. Really tapping into kind of those pre-existent habits. Another method here that we spoke about briefly earlier is reverse enroll. You can prompt guests to register online or through a hyperlink banner or pop-up. New members can identify themselves in store via phone number or email. And a similar advantage here that we've seen in the other 2 methods. It taps into pre-existing customer traffic flows. It meets customers where they are. Jeff, anything else that you've noticed maybe our clients using reverse enroll in any creative ways or what have you?
No, I think it's just, again, another method to enroll. So if they said no to the cashier at the store, or they didn't get asked at the store, and they see some digital advertisement on their phone, or are visiting a social media page of the retailer, it'd be a miss, right, to not, in my opinion, to not allow click through to get a customer to enroll when they're not even interacting with someone at your store or physically at your store. And again, just another opportunity. It's not going to move mountains and drive double enrollments, but it depends on the media you're putting towards it and where those clicks live to be able to do the reverse enroll. I think you just got to be smart about the media, and you don't want to do a national promotion and a big cash giveaway and get people to sign up, and your 95% of people that sign up aren't even close to one of your stores. And that's kind of an artificial registration in some regard. That's not going to be very meaningful, but I think you'd be smart about where you're driving the traffic from. But I don't see any downside in giving an opportunity for a guest to enroll in a different way.
Right. Oh, I think those are great points. Keep it targeted, keep it strategic, but also, I think a new point that you made there is some of these enrollment methods are meant to sort of follow up with a customer that maybe said no in store or to another method. So, some of these are backups in that light. Cool. Moving on to another one, kiosks. Guests can enter information at the kiosk and identify themselves in store via email address or phone number. One advantage that I've heard from clients are just that kiosks often generate questions from guests, like what are these for? Any other aspects of this method to expound on, Jeff?
I think we'll get into physical cards here in a bit. I think they can be really impactful for a new program launching that is handing out physical cards, because I mentioned that drop off that, upwards of 4 and 5 customers that get that card are not going to go register. But if you have a kiosk that you could say, hey, I don't, we have a line here, but go over there and you can enter your card and fully register before you even walk out our door. Obviously, people could download the app and do the same, but having a kiosk for those that don't want to take that additional step at that point to download an app or go to your website, and having another way to go complete that registration, I think is definitely something worth consideration. I think kiosks, I've had some situations and actually experienced this when I was at Thornton's, where they kind of became dust collectors. And I think you've seen them situations at CVS where if you have a mature program in terms of the participation rate is really high, and there's not value in that kiosk beyond just driving registration, well, they might not be as valuable then. But I think it's, at least at the initial launch and for a short term, especially if physical cards are involved, a great way to improve that registration rate for those physical cards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another method here, text to join. You can text your email address to a phone number and click on the responding push notification to access the registration page. An advantage here, it's again kind of meeting guests where they are. You can print the text to enroll number anywhere to catch the guest's attention. Jeff, how widely used is this method, and does it have other advantages?
I'd say it's a little bit limited. I think in the day, it seems like not even 3-4 years ago, like people being less likely to download the app was a real thing. It seems like this, since people are using their smartphones and more, a wide range of customers willing to download apps and use that as the primary touch point, I think the idea of having text to join has become a little more limited. But it is another great channel for communication, SMS in general. So allowing it as an enrollment method to start a conversation with a customer via SMS, I think is a viable consideration. But it's not going to probably be the primary enrollment method. But again, this is about casting the wider net. And I think the other thing is having the right messaging. One opportunity is at the pump where there's not a cashier to talk about loyalty, and signage can promote downloading the app and things like that. But I've seen some customers do a really nice job with a simple text enroll that's messaged well at the pump. Instead of downloading the app, just send your email to this phone number and we'll automatically enroll you and send you a link back to fully register. So it's just, again, casting that wider net and giving people alternate ways to join, because some people like to do it different ways and some people need touched a few times before they do it.
Got it, Jeff. One more thing I wanted to ask on here, because you had mentioned when we were preparing for this webinar talking about, sort of building a profile more slowly over time through text. Is there kind of like an incremental way to use text to join that loops customers into your program?
Yeah, I think, in addition to just getting them to enroll, right now, a lot will provide a link back to a registration page where they can fill out their information. But I've seen executions really interesting where you're sort of messaging back and forth with sort of a AI that's building your registration over time, or back and forth in a text. So give me your first name, your last name, and give me your address. And that's a maybe less daunting way to sort of build a profile over time, rather than having them go to a registration page where there's 8 to 10 fields to fill out all at once.
Brilliant. The last method that we're going to explore today is physical cards. It's kind of been the dark horse. It's maybe a bit antiquated. I know I don't hold any loyalty cards in my wallet, but maybe my parents do. Jeff, any ideas on where physical cards can fit kind of within your enrollment strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely worth considering when launching a program. I'll start by saying we have several clients that have never had physical cards and just, had people only be able to go to the website or download the app to enroll in the program, and they have very successful programs. So I think you have to think about, your geographic location, the demographics of your customer, and do they have the like older populations, right? I mean, it's sort of maybe not always the case. My mother is old; she uses a smartphone and a mobile app, but as many don't. So for those that will say no to that, it's nice to have a way to hand them a card to engage in the program. And again, many of them won't ultimately register, but some of those ultimately would never download an app and go in. So I think it's an important consideration. Again, think about your demographics, and also think about that kiosk we mentioned or some other form. We've had other people have like an extra employee staffed in the store to be able to help guests register so it doesn't slow down the line. I think if you're going to have your physical cards out, you just have to know that you're best going to get that 20% registration rate unless you really do something in store away from the point of sale and the register to be able to drive that registration rate. And we've had other programs launch with physical cards, and once they get up to 25-30% penetration, slowly fade them out and only allow enrollments going forward from that point with digital methods and not having physical cards. So I think it's really important when launching a program to consider, but again, not a requirement.
Got it, Jeff. I think one thing that's cool is thinking through these 6 enrollment methods. Some are really self-sufficient, and it sounds like others are great ways to kind of meet guests halfway and get them into the program to some extent, registered, maybe not enrolled, and then convert them over using another enrollment method. Any sort of concluding thoughts before we go on to the next tip here about how to think through all these ways of enrollment methods and how to balance them, combine them strategically?
I just go back to the casting the wide net, and I also think these decisions aren't forever decisions. Like you might use physical cards and kiosks until you get to 15 to 20%, and then get rid of physical cards over time and take the kiosks out of store. I just think you have to think about, and then how aggressive you want to be with these different things. Physical cards have a cost. Some clients have gotten situations where the team members are handing them out such high rate, it becomes thousands of dollars a month of card costs, and that's a hindrance. But I think in the beginning, it's worth considering, even at that cost, the incremental registrations and enrollments you can drive from doing that. But again, decisions aren't final, and evaluate these over the life of your program to decide, what new enrollment methods might be here in a year or two from now, and which of the ones we started with might not be working as we had intended, and maybe move on from those.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. So moving on to the next section, it's also really important to strategize around your loyalty program communications. And so there's kind of 3 major topics to keep in mind here, and one of them is how you're going to craft that conversation at the POS as a new customer is checking out. Jeff, tell us a little bit about how to approach that strategy and why it's so important.
Yeah, I guess we want to make first off, training is critical to this, right? We need our team members in store to fully engage and understand what the loyalty program is, allow them to participate in the program so they see the value as a customer and maybe some additional benefits. But I think you need to set them up for success, right? There's a lot going on with these loyalty programs. But once the simple message that they can deliver in just a couple sentences, that's a really clear call to action and value, like, hey, register today and get 10 cents off every day for the next 30 days. That's it. Making it very simple. You don't have to explain the whole program. And then enforcing that, giving them the training and then enforcing that and monitoring that and rewarding the customers that are doing well. We'll get into contests in here like that. But you want to set them up for success to allow that conversation to happen naturally and not make it a hindrance and something that they fear talking about.
Absolutely. So, beyond the training, beyond the, really getting the messaging down, the marketing side of this also, I'd imagine, is really key. And part of that, I would imagine, rests on, just refining the messaging, but also being creative about where to place QR codes, where to place banners online. Again, I think it plays out that philosophy of just cast as wide a net as possible.
Yeah, I think you need to treat loyalty as a priority throughout the organization. You have to have, great signage to communicate it. You have to have team members confident in talking about with clear, concise points. Leadership, people internally have to see it as a priority, starting with your leadership team, down to the regional managers, down to the store managers, down to the team members, and talking about loyalty and monitoring its success. So all that sort of loyalty has a place to play in lots of parts of the business, and making sure it's a priority.
Well said, Jeff. So I want to bring up one story that maybe helps chart just the difference that communications can make. Now the graph below shows sort of a before and after. In the midst of COVID, a brand turned their POS prompts for loyalty away from the customer, just wanting to save the customer from having to touch the PIN pad, and they saw that monthly enrollment declined 4 to 5%. Then the brand reinstated the loyalty prompt in February, and they immediately saw the loyalty program engagement kick back up. Monthly enrollment increased 34%, monthly registration increased 14%, and annual registration increased 61%. I mean, Jeff, this was obviously a very special, sort of unique instance in which there were some health and safety concerns, but talk to us about why this underscores the importance of giving customers every single opportunity to enroll in your program, and really meeting them where they are.
Yeah, I mean, it was a situation, and we don't get many cases where you change something as dramatically as this and are able to see the impact that it had. So I think what this told us, at least for this customer, and I think it's probably directional for other programs as well, is that just asking a customer whether or not they're part of the loyalty, yes or no, can drive up your penetration participation in the program 4 or 5%. So, and that doesn't have to be a prompt on a screen where a customer or a member of your program, a guest is selecting yes or selecting no. This is also making sure that you're enforcing that your team members, if there's not a prompt, are asking at every transaction whether or not they're part of the loyalty program. I mean, we can get into conversation around, do we want to slow down the transaction, to be able to talk to them about why they should be in loyalty if they're not, but simply asking yes or no. And consistently doing that can really drastically impact your participation rate, which is ultimately what we're trying to do here: drive more enrollments, drive them to identify themselves at every transaction. So, again, it was nice to see this pop right back up when they turned it back on. We saw that same decline when they turned it off. So I think, again, it's enforcing and making the training so that every team member that's going to be interacting with a customer is comfortable and capable of talking about loyalty in a very concise and meaningful way, and that you're monitoring these things to make sure that all your stores and all your team members are doing it 100% of the time. Obviously, that's aspirational. We often talk about CVS. We joke that it's a fireable offense if CVS, if you don't ask a customer whether or not a loyalty program. Whether or not that's true, I don't know, but that's how serious it is and how much an impact it can make.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's both just keeping the loyalty program top of mind first and foremost for guests with that simple yes or no, and then kind of refining the communications from a guest that needs a bit more convincing. So moving forward here, the last tip that we're going to look at is employee contests. Jeff, why consider employee incentives in competitions?
I think we talked about establishing the right training and enforcing and monitoring. I think, as with anything, once you've have good practice and behavior established, providing some additional incentive can really help take that to the next level. And we've seen a couple of just screenshots here of uptick in registrations and accounts registering during the times at which they do these contests. And we've seen clients, the one on the left here was driving very little for a time period, and then in May of 22 implemented a contest for the back half of the year and just saw drastic impact in the number of registrations. So we know it can make an impact, and we have different structures to sort of think about. You don't just want to have something on and it's always on and it becomes like an afterthought. They get excited early, but I think doing these a couple times a year, and we'll get into some examples of how we do those, can really drive the right acquisition and new enrollments that are going to keep your program healthy and growing in the future.
Absolutely. So on the right here, you can see a few examples of employee incentives and competitions and goals. Before we jump into those, Jeff, would you take us through some of the best practices for thinking through and designing competitions?
Yeah, absolutely. we'll get into this. There's various types of contests. We'll share a couple examples here that you might consider. But there's some basic principles we like, to follow as we walk clients through how to best design these. So I think first off, the biggest thing is to keep it simple. We don't want to make it super, complex, and difficult for managers to explain to their teams, and team members are confused. And, what do you mean if we increase our penetration rate from 17.3 to 18%? It's hard to monitor that. But so we often do it with like, hey, let's just say number of registrations you need to drive in a particular week or a particular month. And if you get to that, that's your finish line and what success looks like. So keep it simple and easy for them to understand. And then also celebrate the success, and don't wait till the end. If you're running a month-long contest, do weekly reporting, show the stores that are leading, identify what success looks like, and celebrate and recognize those individuals. Another principle is, make it achievable. We don't want to say, every store has to get 1,000 registrations this month, and there's like 2 stores that have any chance of getting to that out of your 100, hypothetical. We want to make they're reasonable and achievable goals that are determined by the current state of loyalty at that store. We'll get into some of the details of this, but also the size of the market. It might be a rural store that has 30% penetration. I mean, it might be unfair to have them drive a ton of registrations when they've already talked to everyone in their market versus another store in the city that has a lot of opportunity for growth. So things like that we'll get into a little bit. And then go all in, publicize it, talk about it, weekly reporting. I mean, make it a really important thing and focus on. I know there's a lot going on in these stores and a lot of other initiatives that team members have to work about. But if we're going to do this right, we have to communicate it, enforce it, and really highlight it along the way. And then again, don't overlook the training aspect. These are opportunities to reinforce training. We have brands that are very mature programs that run these contests, and one of the main reasons they do is an opportunity to reinforce the training principles and make sure new team members are seeing them, and even older team members that have been there for a while haven't become complacent, and keep it top of mind. So I think that's kind of the general guiding principles we talk about and best practices for these contests or competitions.
Excellent, Jeff. Those are so helpful. So let's take a look at a few of the concrete examples of how you can structure an employee contest. And this first one is a general registration threshold. A fancy name, but a pretty, I want to say cautiously, a pretty simple concept. Tell us how this works, Jeff.
Yeah, I can talk to these next couple. So that, this general registration threshold is saying, we're going to give you goals. In this case, if we're going to look at a particular store and say, if you can drive 25 to 49% more registrations, everyone gets $5, 50 to 99, $10, 100% or more, 15. And it doesn't have to stop at 15. It could go on beyond there. But I think it makes it relevant to the store and fair across the stores to have individual goals that aren't about winning versus a store, but are about building on set thresholds based on your particular performance that are the same sort of percent increases for everyone. And then, it's an unknown cost, but it can be designed in a way, I think, with these that if you did have a $20, $25, $30 payout, we would do that in that the registration incrementally being driven would way more than outpay for the cost of those rewards we're handing out as a result. So, but again, this is one idea. I think Ryan, going on the next one.
Sure.
Another way to look at it is sort of, I mentioned those, stores that are really low penetration or really high penetration, right? So this idea of basing it on their opportunity for improvement. This is what we see kind of more stores doing today. So you might have a store that's at 5% penetration, and we really want to challenge that particular store. But a store at 40% penetration, where we want to challenge them, but it's unfair to say you have to double your registrations next month. You're already doing very well. And we want to have incremental rewards that are more, maybe a little bit even more fair to that store. So in this particular example, we're saying, hey, if you're in the top 25% in participation at your store, say these are stores are in the 30 to 40% penetration rate, we're only going to challenge you to increase your registrations by 25%. But if you're in that bottom 25%, maybe you're 5%, overall or something like that, we're really going to challenge you because we think you have much more opportunity for improvement. This is probably more often than not, but there's reasons to sort of look at the different way. I think the important thing is to consider doing something and just not making it too complex, keeping it simple. and really monitoring that performance along the way. But again, just a couple of examples here of how we've done it differently for a couple different clients of ours. And then I think this next slide gets into, how do we make it even other ideas, right? This isn't uniquely, could this be layered on top? Do we want to once a year maybe do a big sweepstakes based one where it's not just about the $5, $10, or $15, but it's about, more aspirational prizes that are much bigger, cash prizes or chance to win vacations. Oftentimes your vendor partners, these retailers will want to, promote loyalty and support things like this with employee prizes or promotions like this to the general customer base as well. But I think it's a way to keep it fresh and have some new news coming in that is not the same old contest over and over again.
Excellent, thanks, Jeff. Well, I hope that folks found this as insightful as I did. I'm wondering, Jeff, what are some key takeaways from today's presentation?
I think, looking at enrollment, especially when you're launching a program or in a, not a mature program, say sub 10%, I really feel like 80% or more of what you should be focused on in terms of loyalty should be about driving enrollments and in growing the program to the participation levels that are going to be meaningful. Cast that wider net, expand your ways that customers can, the enrollment methods, ways they can join the program, but really getting to that 15, 20% and beyond, because that's where we can then really make more meaningful segmentations and do much more targeted marketing and offers that really change customers' behavior because you're beyond those most loyal guests. And the last thing I say, it all starts with leadership. You have to have loyalty be something that is critical to the organization, and at every level of the organization, they feel the importance of it. And setting your team members, I guess one last thing is setting your team members up for success, making sure they understand loyalty and are comfortable talking about it, and we're monitoring the enforcement of that.
Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. We will hang around in case there are any questions in the next few minutes. I see that we have one. Jeff, can you hang around?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. We had one question come in that asks, how would one track registrations for a contest if registrations are done through mobile?
Registrations through a contest if they're done through mobile. So I assume that question is talking about how do we attribute it to a particular store since it came in through mobile and they didn't hand out a card tied to that store.
The question is, yes, that is the question.
Okay, perfect. So we have other attribution methods. Again, if you hand out a physical card, it's easy to attribute it because it was, swiped in that store. But for app-based or web-based enrollments, we can attribute it to the first store visited after registration. That's not perfect, right? But more often than not, where you heard about it, where a customer may or a team member maybe pushed you to download the app, is where you would visit next, or maybe on that same day. Again, not as 100% accurate as tying that physical card to the store, but that's how we've tackled that for other clients and get directionally to rewarding the right stores in the right way.
Cool, Jeff. I think that's a fair attribution. Folks, if you have any more questions, I think Jeff will hang around for another minute or two. You can use the questions bar or the chat. Either one works. All right, Jeff, I think that's all that we have for you this afternoon. I thank you again for your time. This was an excellent discussion.
Absolutely. Talk to you later.
Take care,
Bye.
everyone.